as we move on. Vanessa, let me welcome you to the program now. And of course, everybody talking about Donald Trump and the great peacemaker with his conversation with Putin yesterday. But what else has he been up to?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's so far fulfilling his mandate to bring a ceasefire to Ukraine. However, he's turning his attention to West Asia and in particular Iran on behalf of Israel. So this was something that Donald Trump tweeted out, I think yesterday. Hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, which is of course known as Ansarullah, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, I mean, as if they're not Yemeni, and hated by the Yemeni people, in reality, of course, supported by the huge majority of the Yemeni people in their battle to end the occupation and oppression of Palestine, all emanate from and are created by Iran in capital letters. He then went on to add to this with further threats. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, in capitals again, and Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. Then basically, I think it's one of the spokespeople for the White House basically went on to Fox News to reiterate the message that Trump was putting out. So let's just play this extraordinary statement.
Well, the Trump administration and the White House were consulted by the Israelis on their attacks in Gaza tonight. And as President Trump has made it clear, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel, but also the United States of America, will see a price to pay. All hell will break loose. And all of the terrorists in the Middle East, again, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, Iranian-backed terror proxies, and Iran themselves should take President Trump very seriously when he says he is not afraid to stand for law-abiding people. He is not afraid to stand up for the United States of America and our friend and our ally Israel.
I mean, this is just, I mean, Trump is effectively, apparently, declaring war on the entire resistance axis across the region from Palestine through to Iran. At the same time, in Israel, this statement was put out by Israel Katz. I called him the war minister of Israel. If Hamas doesn't release all the hostages, the gates of hell will open in Gaza and the murderers and rapists of Hamas will meet the IDF with forces they have never known before. Of course, we're back to the ceasefire shenanigans, which is never anything more than a theatrical play to effectively be used as a weapon to blame Hamas and to enable what is now happening, the violation of the ceasefire in Gaza and the continuation of the ethnic cleansing and genocide. And then again, Ben Gvir is announced to be rejoining the Netanyahu coalition, praising the mass killings carried out in Gaza in the last 48 hours with mass bombing. And then the statement by the Zionist IDF, or Israeli occupation forces, who said that they launched a strong offensive against, of course, they call them terror organizations. These designated areas are considered dangerous combat zones for your own safety, addressing the Palestinians sheltering in what's left of Gaza. You must evacuate immediately to known shelters in western Gaza City and in Khan Yunis. Of course, this is again forced displacement of people that have already been multiple times displaced. The Rafah crossing with Egypt is now closed to all medical cases looking to enter Egypt for hospital care or even to go abroad for medical treatment. So we're back to full-on genocide. While a number of Hamas resistance fighters were killed in the attack, I think it was 3 or 4, the majority of the victims, of course, were children yet again. Just a couple of photos from the aftermath of the attack itself the other day. And the headlines, even in Western media, I have to say, I didn't have to look very far. More than 400 Palestinians, I think the number is now around 462 in one attack. killed and scores injured, now reaching close to an estimated 600 injured, of course, the majority children, in extensive Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. And this is a statement from Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, who works for Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, in Gaza itself. She said immediately after, she described the horrors that she saw, and of course she's been there for much of the genocide in Gaza. There were probably 3 men. The rest were all children, women, and the elderly, everybody caught in their sleep, wrapped in their blankets. Terrifying. So she describes the fact that, again, the majority of the victims were disabled, elderly, innocent civilians, children and women that have been targeted since October the 7th. At the same time, of course, Trump has effectively, with the UK, started a new round of the war against Yemen, which began in March 2015. And in the initial strikes, around 50 Yemenis were killed, injured, in the US-UK aggression on Yemeni cities, which include the targeting of hospitals and cancer centers and schools. Yemen has retaliated. Harry S. Truman attacked for a second time within hours by various ballistic missiles and drones. And there are reports now that there have been 4 attacks on the USS Truman. At the same time, when we're talking about Trump launching what is effectively a regional war, Israel has been increasing its attacks on Syria. It bombed southern Syria a couple of days ago. In Deir, there are convoys of Israeli troops and hardware coming into Syria for the last 48 hours. And yesterday they bombed what they described as a missile battalion in Homs in Syria. So on the border, very close to the border with Lebanon, and I'll come on to that next if we have a quick look at the map. We talked about this previously, just to keep the map on screen. The red circle shows the area on the Syrian-Lebanese border, which was attacked, I think, about a month ago. We talked about it on UK Column, by the HTS al-Qaeda forces, who were driven back by the tribesmen and the clans in this area. There has been a more concerted attack in the last few days by HTS forces. There's now a sort of a semi-ceasefire, but they were again driven back by the tribesmen, and now the Lebanese army forces are on the border with heavy artillery to force back the Syrian terrorist attack. I won't call them Syrian, actually, because the majority of them are foreign mercenaries. So, and at the same time, Israel was actually bombing the Lebanese side on behalf of Jolani's forces. Israel has been bombing southern Lebanon, corresponding with the attack by HTS. So it becomes very clear that Israel is trying to open 2 fronts against Hezbollah in Lebanon, using HTS or al-Qaeda as a proxy in the northeast, and attacking directly in the south, while, of course, disrupting and destabilizing Syria, and while al-Qaeda is continuing with the massacres of the ethnic minorities inside Syria. So it appears to be very clear that Trump, while, let's say, ending the war in Ukraine in agreement with Putin, is now focusing very much on West Asia, with Iran, one assumes, as the final target.
Thank you very much for that, Vanessa. We'll have more international news later on, but let's come back to the UK.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, people will remember back in January, just after the international coup finally toppled the Syrian government and replaced it with al-Qaeda. So Lamy was then saying that he discussed the importance of an inclusive political transition and regional security with interim Syrian Foreign Minister Assad Shaibani. The UK will support Syria's long-term stability through humanitarian aid and coordination. Of course, they didn't. They basically destabilized Syria to the maximum from about 2009 onwards. But let's look fast forward to 17th of March. UK pledges up to 160 million to support Syria's recovery and stability in post-Assad era. The UK government has pledged 160 million in aid, I always put that in inverted commas, to help stabilize, should also be in inverted commas, Syria following the fall of the Syrian government. Let's have a look at what the actual Minister for the Middle East, Hamish Falconer, said. UK aid delivered through trusted UN and NGO partners will provide life-saving support for Syrians, including refugees across the region. Of course, Mike, we know who those trusted NGOs are, predominantly the White Helmets. We also know that there will be zero transparency about that 160 million add to the previous millions, if not billions, that the UK has sent to support basically al-Qaeda and their White Helmet helpers and all other NGOs associated with al-Qaeda in Syria. And then this is quite interesting. This was on the 6th of March, an update on Syria, lifting asset freezes on 24 entities, which includes the Syrian airlines, the Syrian Central Bank. But interesting that they're maintaining sanctions on the Assad family because of their alleged links to the Captagon drug trade in Syria that we've covered quite a few times on UK Column and debunked, particularly a BBC documentary accusing former President Assad of being the head of the Captagon trade. And interesting that there have been a number of arrests recently of drug smugglers in Syria. So despite President Assad no longer being present, the most recent one, Iraq's Interior Ministry announced Sunday the seizure of 1.1 tons of Captagon and the arrest of a major cross-border drug network in coordination with Erbil and Soleimani counter-narcotic units. Authorities tracked a truck going from Syria via Turkey. So one assumes it's going from Idlib, which was previously under the control of Jolani, who's now the unelected, self-proclaimed president in Damascus. And it is one of the Iraq's largest drug busts. So a few questions to be raised over, one, the reason for the sanctions, and two, the propaganda regarding the Captagon production in Syria. And then we move on back to Brussels and von der Leyen and the whole team there. This is standing with Syria donor conference in Brussels that ended, I think, a couple of days ago. And who was invited? The interim foreign minister, who, of course, was previously al-Qaeda. I know that we've mentioned this before. He was actually a founder of al-Qaeda in Syria, named back in December as a caretaker foreign minister. I know I keep repeating this, but I do think it's quite important. And here is a picture of him on the right or left, depending on how you're looking at it. I think that was at the WEF in Davos, and on the left as an acting al-Qaeda and formerly ISIS member carrying out atrocities against Syrian civilians. And of course, he did meet Qaeda Khalas, sorry, I'm putting on the Arabic accent there, bilateral meeting between Foreign Minister Assad al-Shaibani and EU High Representative Kaya Kallas on the sidelines of the Brussels donor conference on Syria. So again, the EU and their various representatives embracing al-Qaeda members in Brussels. And of course, they're also upping the ante in their funding for Syria. The EU and its partners, Kaya Kallas says, just pledged 5.8 billion for Syria and its neighbors. This will support Syria at a crucial time of transition and address the dire needs on the ground. This is a chance for the people of Syria to seize the moment and shape their own destiny. But I just want to move on to Assad Shaibani's actual speech that he made, where again he was basically reiterating the propaganda that has sustained the regime change war for the UK, the EU and the US against Syria since 2011, that it was all the fault of the minorities and President Assad. He states that the age of tyranny is over. We have sworn an oath to our people that the age of oppression has passed and will not return. And he goes on, he says, and as is the case now, I've put in brackets there, the unelected al-Qaeda Syrian government remains the sole guarantor of civil peace. Well, really? I mean, last week we talked about the ethnic cleansing and the effect of genocide that's being conducted by HTS and its various foreign mercenary, fanatical, extremist, terrorist groups. against the people in the coastal area, particularly Christians and Alawites, but even against Sunni Muslims who are protesting massacres of Syrian Alawites. So I just want to play this video of a lady who was being interviewed in Jableh on the coastal area in Syria.
دعمتك
أهلي هنيك، أمي هنيك، إخوالي، رفقاتي، حارتي، الجيران. أنا خايفة على الكل، الكل حرام، في عالم ما زنبط، والله في عالم ما زنبط.
من وين أنت؟
أنا من جبلة، جارنا تحت بيتنا فتح الباب قال لهم فوتوا فتشوا، وصلوا قدام مرته بناته صبتين صغار اسمه حسام حبيب.
The massacres are continuing. Houses, apartments, shops are being looted and burned. And there is now talk of displacing all of the Alawite civilians and replacing them with Sunni Muslim extremist factions to actually sort of reconstitute that area of Syria. And I just wanted to quickly show this rather than another execution video. This is a kid in al-Bab, Aleppo, being given a semi-automatic, I think it is, by an HTS fighter. This is how the children in Syria are being indoctrinated. So I would also ask, when do the UK or EU pledge money to actually alleviate the problems in the target countries?